ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله وسلم عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد, to proceed, I want to take the opportunity to read something of benefit from Al-Imam Al-Hafiz Shaykh Al-Islam fi Asrihi Ibn Qayyim Al-Jawziyya rahimahullah ta'ala, the great Imam of the Sunnah, the reviver of the Sunnah, along with his Shaykh Al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala in his generation, as regards how a person can safeguard their mind. How a person can safeguard their mind. Before doing that, to show us the importance of the subject matter of the importance of safeguarding the mind, I want to read to you some words from Al-Imam Al-Allama Muhammad ibn Salih Al-Uthaymin. When you hear somebody referred to as an imam, that means that they are matbu', or they have atba', and they have a qawl that is muttaba', and they have positions that are followed. They are somebody who is loved and respected and revered amongst the Muslims for being upon the sunnah of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so without a doubt, Shaykh Al-Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala was from the imams of the sunnah. And he has a tremendous statement. And what I'm going to read from here is from the tafsir of Surah Al-Safat. And in the printed version it is page 37 and 38. Where the Shaykh, he speaks about what is referred to by a number of the scholars, a common term that we have heard many times, of al-ghazw al-fikri, and the ideological war. The ideological war has been unleashed against mankind, particularly over the last couple of 100 years, and more particular over the last 3 generations. Al-Allama Shaykh Muhammad ibn Salih Al-Uthaymin, he says, إِنَّ الْعِلْمَ نَوْعٌ مِنَ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. That indeed knowledge is a type, meaning learning and teaching beneficial knowledge, is a type of jihad in the path of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. لأن طالب العلم يحاج أعداء الشريعة بالحق ليدحض به باطلهم. For verily, the student of knowledge, he must use the knowledge to debate with the enemies of the Sharia, with the truth, in order to banish their falsehood. وأحيانا يكون الغزو الفكري أعظم فتكا من الغزو المسلح كما هو مشاهد. He said that sometimes the ideological war may cause greater damage and destruction than a mobilized, weaponized war. Sometimes an ideological war can cause more devastation and destruction and ruin than a weaponized war, as is something that can be observed by the people. فإن الغزو الفكري يدخل كل بيت باختيار صاحب البيت. Because an ideological war enters into every home. For this reason we heard some of the mashayikh say about the statement of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr, was graded to be Hasan by Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, when he said, كنا جلوسا عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يوما فذكر الفتنة فأكثر في ذكرها. On one occasion we were sitting with the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned fitna, and he mentioned it a great deal with a lot of detail. حتى ذكر فتنة الأحلاس, until he mentioned a number of different types and categories of fitan. From that was what was called fitnatul ahlas, from the fitnatun دخلوها من تحت قدم رجل من أهل بيت يزعم أنه مني وليس مني, up until the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he spoke about how the Muslims would fight against one another and pillage one another and take the wealth of one another and oppress one another and so on and so forth. and how the people of authority will not judge by what Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala have revealed, and they will lose power because of that, the likes of these affairs. He said, ثم فتنة الدحيماء لا تدع أحدا من هذه الأمة إلا لطمته لطمة. He said then the final fitna will be called the fitna to duhayma. Fitna to duhayma, I mean the fitna of the blameworthy masses, as is stated by Al-Baghawi and Sharh Sunnah. And duhayma, they are and da'amatul nas al-madmumun, they are the blameworthy masses of the people, and the people that are not upon praiseworthy qualities, praiseworthy traits. Then he described that fitna and how it will be, لا تدع أحدا من هذه الأمة إلا لطامته لطمة. It would not leave a person from this nation except that it would لطمته, and he latma, and he is when a person is struck on their face with an open hand. If somebody was to open up their hand as wide as it could go and stretch it back, and you can see the bayad of the ibt, you see the white of the armpit, swat, right? Slap you in the face as hard as they can slap you. That's what? That's a disrespect, right? It will be humiliation. It will be like a slap in the face. It will not leave a person in this nation except that it will strike them a blow, and like a slap in the face. يُصْبِحُ الرَّجُلُ فِيهَا مُؤْمِنًا وَيُمْسِي كَافِرًا. That is the time in which a person may begin their day as a believer and retire at the end of the day as a disbeliever. فَإِذَا كَانَ ذَلِكَ حَتَّى يَصِيرَ النَّاسِ إِلَى فُسْطَتَيْنِ. And the fitna would increase in severity until the people fell into two camps. فُسْطَاتِ إِيمَانِ لَا نِفَاقَ فِي وَفُسْطَاتِ نِفَاقٍ لَا إِيمَانَ فِي. The camp of belief where there is no nifaq, and the camp of nifaq where there is no belief. The camp of nifaq where there is no belief, and the camp of belief where there is no nifaq. فَإِذَا كَانَ ذَلِكُمْ فَانْتَظِرُوا الدَّجَّالَ مِنْ يَوْمِهِ وَمِنَ الْغَدِ. When that is your situation, anticipate the Dajjal on that day or the next day. And so the believer is afraid as regards his beliefs and his ideology and his values and his attitudes and his understanding and his perception being warped, and likewise for his family and his intention and his desires being warped and changed to that which is not conducive to coming towards Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala and the hereafter. And what we see of the Ghazw al-Fikri, as a Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned, and that it enters every home. It has struck a blow to every believer. There are very few people that can get away from it. It is in the majallat, it is in the suhuf. It is something that is in the magazines, it is in the newspapers. And it is something that is on the television, it is something in the education system. Even if a person thinks that they're taking their child away from the ideological war by placing them into an Islamic school, the last time I checked, the Salafis don't have many schools across the United States of America. And so in the majority of situations, you're placing your child in a school that is without a doubt being afflicted and affected by the ideological war. And the Ahlul Bid'ah, the Hamzatul Wasl, and they are the Hamzatul Wasl, the direct connecting factor between kufr and Islam. And the innovation is a slippery slope. They're going to be indoctrinated, whether you like it or not, or whether you are cognizant of it or not, with affairs that are contrary to the teachings of Islam on a regular basis. And so the father and the mother and the disciplinarian and the teacher and the Muslim in general is afraid as regards their ideology, as regards their understanding and their perception of the religion, as regards their tasawwurat, as regards their idrak, as regards their understanding, their perception, their conceptualization of affairs of this Ghazw al-Fikri. And they are afraid of nifaq and kufr and shirk, as was stated by Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, reported by Al-Faryabi rahimahullah ta'ala, sifat al-nifaq wa dhamm al-munafiqeen. He said rahimahullah ta'ala, half of his book, he dedicated the book that he wrote about nifaq, and he has two long chapters. The first chapter is about the qualities of the munafiq, and nifaqun akbar and nifaqun asghar. and what is called minor nifaq and what is called major nifaq. Minor nifaq, which the ulama say have 8 characteristics, has 8 characteristics, and likewise major nifaq, likewise it has sittatu anwa', has 6 qualities, 6 characteristics. And this is something that whenever you hear, that there are a number of qualities for minor nifaq and a number of qualities for major nifaq, you should ask yourself, what do you know about those qualities? And what are you doing to combat having those qualities? Because the second chapter of the book of Al-Fariyabi rahimahullah ta'ala, where he reports a statement of Al-Hasan al-Basri and the statements of the Imams of the Salaf from the Tabi'een, the likes of Abu Ali al-Riyahi and Abu Idris al-Khawlani and others from the Tabi'een, from the people of Basra and Kufa and Mecca and Medina, and from the best generation after the companions of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and those who came after them, the likes of Sufyan al-Thawri and others, and Sufyan ibn Uyayna. He mentions a statement of the Salaf, and where he said, لا يأمنه إلا منافق ولا يخافه إلا مؤمن. And no one feels safe from nifaq except for a munafiq, and no one fears it except for the believer. So Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions this ghazwun fikri, this ideological war that has entered into the home of every Muslim, بِاخْتِيَارِ صَاحِبِ الْبَيْتِ, and it enters the home by the choice of the Sahib al-Bayt, and of the man of the home or the parent in the home, and they are the one who chose to allow for the ideological war to enter into their home. And you're not going to be able to escape it in the majority of situations. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ مُشْتَكَى. We complain about our plight to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala and ask Him for a tawfiq wa sadad. He said, but it enters the home, and the pernicious nature of this fitna is that it enters the home by the choice. They make you a willing participant in your own destruction. By the choice, under the guise of what? Under the guise of entertainment, under the guise of passing off one's free time and relaxing and so on and so forth, enters into the home بِاخْتِيَارِ صَاحِبِ الْبَيْتِ, and with the choice of the person who lives in that home, دُونَ أَنْ يَجِدَ مُعَارَضَةً أَوْ مُقَاوَمَةً, and without meeting any opposition or any muqawama, anyone trying to deal with it and confront it. لكن الغزو العسكري لا يدخل البيت. He said, however, the weaponized military war, it doesn't enter a person's home. بل ولا يدخل البلد إلا بعد قتال مرير ومدافعة شديدة. He said, and it usually doesn't even enter a person's land, meaning that wars are usually fought where? At the borders, at the hudud. And they're usually trying to, usually when they're in the country, the war is over, right? Usually when they're actually inside of the city, right? Once they penetrated the wall, so on and so forth, in the history of Islam, and when they built the major cities, most of the cities were thughur. They were military outposts that turned into, economic centers for the Muslims. The likes of Kufa, the likes of Basra, they were built when the Muslims were at war with the Persians to have a place to bunker the troops and to send supplies and so on and so forth. They became major cities. And then Baghdad, it became the Asima later. Baghdad, it was built in the time of the Tabi'een. And then when Khurasan was opened by the Samaniyun. The Samaniyun, may Allah tabarak wa ta'ala have mercy upon them. They were the rulers of modern day Afghanistan and Iran. They entered into Islam taw'an wa ikhtiyaran. They entered into Islam out of choice. Khurasan, the majority of Khurasan wasn't conquered by battles and so on and so forth. But when they built these cities like Al-Marw, like Naysabur, where Imam Muslim was from, like Sijistan, which is a land more, like Bukhara, like any of those other cities that were there, like Shasha, like Ashash, and other cities. If you look in the history, when they would build a city from the ground up, or when a city would go from being just a town or like an outskirt type city to being a major city that had prosperity Islamically. Somebody said somebody is video recording. Barakallahu feekum. Don't record. Barakallahu feekum. they said that they would build these cities. Look how they built the cities. They built this city, the largest structure. Here you have the downtowns of the city, right? What do you see? The biggest buildings are what? The courthouse. Right? There's a lot of criminals, a lot of crime. What else? Prison, the county jail. What else? The state, the state capitol building, so on and so forth. In Islam, they built the city around the masjid. The Masjid Jami, an enormous masjid. And the most respected person in the city, more respected than the ruler himself, was the ulama of hadith wal athar. To the point that the scholars, if they want to go from one land to another in the time of hadith, was called al-asr al-dhahabi, the golden age of hadith, that they would have to sneak out of the town to go from one town to another. And then when they would go to the other town, because the people loved them so much, they didn't want them to leave, they would try to prevent them from leaving, right? And if they try to go to another town, because they know if they went to another town, the people would try to keep them. Imagine a society that's built around the masjid and the ulama. And then they would have 2, 3 enormous walls protecting the city. In order to get into the city, there would be one wall with a moat, another wall, and another wall. They were almost impenetrable. The only way that you can invade those cities is by somebody on the inside helping you, in the most case, or the jawasis and those sorts of things, spies, and those sorts of affairs. But the point is that once the invading army had entered into the land, had entered into the actual town, then the war was over. And you saw the majority of battles, they were fought on the outskirts of cities. And Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that the military war, it usually doesn't even enter the land. And it's usually fought at the borders, and it might get up to like the walls of the city and so on and so forth. But it usually doesn't even enter the place where you live, let alone come inside of your home. So think about what he's saying here. Think about the history of Islam. Think about the history of the world, so on and so forth. And think about the pernicious, destructive nature of the ideological war. He said this is a war that enters into your home, inside of your home. And not just is inside of your home, but you let it in. By your choice. You let it in. He said in the other type of war, weaponized, mechanized war, he said it comes by, it only enters into the land. And it never usually enters into a person's home, and that usually only happens after any extensive fighting and the people putting up a great resistance. But in this situation, there's no resistance. You let them into the home, right? And the child is watching, they call Generation X the MTV generation, right? And this is one of the greatest tools that they use, music and so on and so forth, and the culture industry and these sorts of things to change the values and perceptions of the people, these sorts of things. And you let that thing into your home. You let the war into your home, right? If you was to say that there was a Muslim who let some uncouth homosexuals and drug dealers and these sorts of people, and to the end of it, into his home, and they're sitting there talking to his children. He opened up his home and he said, come into my house and talk to my children. You would say, Na'udhu billah, ayna dhahaba aqluh. You would say, A'udhu billah, what happened to his mind? The man has lost his mind. But if you turn on the television, you flip from one channel to another channel to another channel to another channel to another channel. He said, there's benefit. There's benefit like khamr, right? Khamr has some manafi', and a couple benefits, but its ithm is greater than its benefit, right? The scholars, they say that from the benefits of khamr, as is mentioned in the Quran, that there are some benefits in alcohol. There's a general principle that says that everything that the benefit is outweighed by the harm, that the harm outweighs the benefit. Yani mafsadatuhu arjah min maslahatihi. And then it is forbidden. Then it's forbidden. The scholars, they say from the benefits of khamr, from the benefits of khamr is that it makes people brave, right? Courage juice. So a person, and he may not have a lot of wits about himself, his heart may be pumping Kool-Aid when it comes time to, stand up for himself and stand up for his property, so on and so forth. But if they have that courage juice in them, he may have the gumption and the strength to stand their ground, right? Hey, but if we was to use that logic, we would say, okay, well, Some people are depressed, so it's okay for them to smoke weed. Some people are, sad, so, they want to drink some spirits and uplift their spirits and so on and so forth. So a person, without a doubt, they find that this ghazw and that this battle is something that is very pernicious in nature and very destructive in nature. And Shaykh Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala he said, فَعَدَاءُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ يَتَسَلَّطُونَ عَلَيْهِمْ أَحْيَانًا بِالْغَزْوِ الْمُسَلَّحِ بِالْقِتَالِ وهذا يمكن التحرز منه وأحيانا بالغزو الفكري وهو أشد وأنكى من الغزو المسلح. He said, so the enemies of the Muslims sometimes get authority over them and control over them through weaponized fighting with weapons. He said, and this is something that is possible for people to protect themselves against usually. He said that sometimes they attack them with al-ghazw al-fikri, with the ideological war. He said, and this is more severe and it is more devastating than weaponized war. لأنه يصيب المسلمين في قعر بيوتهم ولا يعلمون به, because it strikes the Muslims in the core of their home while they don't even realize. ربما يخرجون من الإسلام ويمسح الإسلام من أفئدتهم مسحا كاملا وهم لا يشعرون. He said perhaps they may leave from Islam and Islam may be wiped entirely from their hearts without even realizing. لأنهم يغزون المسلمين بالشهوات. He said because they fight against the Muslims with shahawat, with lust and desires. وَالْقَلْبُ إِذَا انْغَمَسَ بِالشَّهَوَاتِ نَسِيَ مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. And the heart, when it is submerged within its desires, it forgets what it was created for. نَسِيَ عِبَادَةُ اللَّهِ. It forgets to worship Allah تبارك وتعالى. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِي قَلْبِهِ تَعَلُّقٌ بِاللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And his heart will not have a connection to Allah عز وجل. فتجد الإنسان في حال قيامه وقعوده وذهابه ومجيئه لا يفكر إلا بهذه الشهوات. And you find a person, no matter what they're doing, if they're coming, if they're going, if they're standing, if they're sitting, if they're walking, or if they're staying, that they are constantly thinking about their desires. ولا يسعى إلا لهذه الشهوات. And they aren't working for anything or giving effort for anything except to acquire these desires. وَكَأَنَّهُ لَمْ يُخْلَقْ لِغَيْرِهَا. To the extent that it is as though he has not been created for anything but his desires. وَكَذَلِكَ يُغْضُونَ فِي نُفُوسِ الضُّعَفَاءِ تَعْظِيمْ هَؤُلَاءِ الْكُفَارِ. He said, and likewise, along these same lines, they nourish within the souls of the weak ones from amongst us the veneration and respect of the kuffar. وَأَنَّهُمْ أكثر تقدما وأشد حضارة وأقوم طريقا وما شابه ذلك. And they make them believe that they are more advanced and more civilized than we are. They are more advanced and more civilized than we are. And that they have a more correct way than our way, and what is like this. فَيَنْصَحِرُ الْمُسْلِمِ فِي حَرَائِقْ هَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ. And so the Muslim, he finds himself fused by the fire of these people, connected to them, and he is burnt into his mentality. وَهَذَا لَا شَكْ أَنَّهُ مَوْجُودٌ. And there is no doubt that this is occurring. وَأَنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْبِلَادِ الْإِسْلَامِيَّةِ زَالَتْ معنويتهم وحلكت شخصيتها بسبب هذا الغزو الفكري. He said, and there is no doubt that many of the Muslim lands, that they have lost their ma'nawiyah, that they have lost their spirituality, and their personalities have been destroyed on account of this ghazw al-fikri, on account of this ghazw al-fikri, this ideological war. إنهم لغزوا البلاد الإسلامية غزوا عسكريا لحل بأبدانهم البلاد لكن قلوب الناس نافرة مبغضة لهم. لكن المشكلة أن يغزو الناس بصفاتهم وأخلاقهم. He said if they were to wage war against the lands of Islam with a weaponized war, he said, and the most that they would do is take over their lands. He said, while their hearts would hate them and their hearts would flee from them. He said, but the problem, the real problem, is that they wage war against the people with their sifat, with their akhlaq, with their aqaid, and with their qualities. As the Shaykh Uthaymeen, he says in some of his khutab, he said they launched any war of love and emotions against the believers, saying, we love you. We want the good for you. We just want you to progress. We just want you to catch up to the rest of the world. We want you to have your rights. And the likes of these things, وَعَقَائِدِهِمْ, and with their beliefs, and with their character. At a point you find some people, and you are quick to say that the kuffar have better character than the Muslims. The kuffar have better character than the Muslims. He said that akhlaq, and the akhlaq is of two types, al-khuluqu ma'Allah, wal-khuluqu ma'al-khalq. And your character with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, and your character with the creation. And what is the most important type? Of course, your character with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, which is to believe everything that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has revealed through His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to obey everything that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has ordered us with, and to abstain from what Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has forbidden. So the person yukadhib ma akhbarana Allahu bih, a person who rejects what Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has informed us of, and the person who makes halal what Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has forbidden, and makes haram what Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has permitted, we to say about the likes of that person that they have good character. The likes of that person they are any sharrul bariyah, they are the worst of the creation. They are the worst of the creation. It reminds you of the statement of Al-Awza'i rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, may Allah have mercy upon him, he said, inna shaytan يدعو صاحب البدعة أو يخلو بين صاحب البدعة والعبادة حتى يغتر به. That the shaitan, he leaves the innovator alone as regards his ibadah, as regards his worship, so the people will be deluded by him. So the people will be deluded by him. The believer, every time he tries to do something, the shaitan, he finds a shaitan ala kulli tariq, upon every path. If he wants to fast, if he wants to pray, if he wants to recite the Quran, if he wants to join the ties of the womb, if he wants to make dua, whatever he wants to do, he'll find the shaitan will come to him with waswasa. And the more he has of knowledge and the more he has of ibadah, the more the shaitan is going to come at him to try to destroy him. And the more he is a qudwa and an example for other people, and looked at and emulated by the people and respected by the people, the more the shaitan is going to try to destroy him and give him waswasa and so on and so forth. But the person of innovation and the kafir, the shaitan leaves him alone. Let him act, pretend to be as righteous as he wants to pretend. Right? Let the people be deluded by him. He's such a nice person. He's such a kind person. He cares so much about the people. Until he becomes a qudwa and a shar. And the people, they say that if the Muslims were such good people, then why are these kuffar treating me better than the Muslims in these sorts of affairs? Without a doubt, this is a deficiency on the part of the Muslims. But the Muslim cannot be so weak-minded to believe that the kuffar, that they want khair for him, that they really want good for him, because they don't even know the good. They don't even know the good. There may be some peripheral things that are good. A person says, yeah, I like to eat. Yeah, I like food stamps. Yeah, I like health care. Yeah, I like this. Yeah, I like that. Right? Alhamdulillah, it benefits me, it benefits my family according to the situation of a person. They can benefit from those things if they need those things. And as long as they're given the proper documentation and right information regarding those things, right? But the person should be afraid taking anything from the kuffar. And some of the salaf, they said, Allahumma la taj'ali sahibi bid'atin 'indi yadan fayuhibbuhu qalbi. Oh Allah, don't allow the innovator, and some of them said, the mushrik, to have an upper hand above me where I need anything from them financially, so lest my heart should start to love them. Lest my heart should start to love them. This is what the Mashaykh have said to us for the years. They said especially some people that are coming over as refugees and so on and so forth from war-torn countries that are destroyed by civil war and strife and so on and so forth. They come to these lands, and the Christians and the missionaries and so on and so forth, they open up their arms and they accept them, and they say, come to us and we'll give you housing, come to us, we'll give you clothing, come to us and this, and come to us and that, right? And when they say thank you so much, they say praise Jesus, right? And little by little they start to ingrain in you kufr and shirk. He says, so it is a ideological war. It is an ideological war that is launched against the character of the Muslims and the creed of the Muslims. وَهُمْ جَالِسُونَ فِي بُيُوتِهِمْ. And where is the war being fought? They're sitting in their homes in front of the boob tube, right? Flipping through channels, being uploaded. He said, وَهُمْ جَالِسُونَ فِي بُيُوتِهِمْ. While they're sitting in their homes. قَدْ فَتَحُوا لَهُمُ الْقُلُوبَ هذا هو المشكل. He said, and they have opened up their hearts to them. He said, this is what is really problematic. وهذا هو الدمار. And this is what is really destructive. ولهذا كان الغزو بالسلاح العلمي المستمد من كتاب الله تبارك وتعالى وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مساويا إن لم يكن أنفع وأبلغ من الغزو العسكري. He said it for this reason. The opposite of that is true, or the same holds true for us, that the battle that we wage with beneficial knowledge from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He said in Surah Al-Furqan, He said, وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَبَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ قَرْيَةٍ نَظِيرًا فَلَا تُطِعِ الْكَافِرِينَ وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. Had we so willed, we would have sent a nadhir, a warner in every single qaryah, every single town. We know that a messenger was sent in every nation. But Allah said, had we so willed, we would have sent a messenger, a warner in every single town. A messenger in every single town. So do not cooperate and obey. Do not cooperate with and obey the disbelievers. وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ. This verse was revealed in Mecca. But rather, wage jihad against them with it, meaning with the Quran, jihad and kabira. Before they were even given the permission to defend their lives. Wage war with it. Launch an offensive against the disbelievers with knowledge, with the book of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, jihad and kabira. With a tremendous jihad. He said this is likewise, it is just as effective or more beneficial than physically fighting the disbelievers. To fight against them with knowledge. To fight against them with knowledge. That's why they say that the greatest victory in Islam was the Fath of Al-Hudaybiyah. Was the day, the Sulh of Al-Hudaybiyah. Because more people entered into the fold of Islam. And 2 years after the battle of after the Sulh, the peace treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, than in the many years that the Prophet ﷺ has spent calling his people in Mecca and then in the Medinan period, from the time he was sent up into the Sulh of Al-Hudaybiyah, more people, tens of more people entered into Islam. Thousands and thousands of people entered the fold of Islam in those couple of years. As Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri he said that there was فَلَمْ يَبْقَى أَحَدٌ يَفْقَهُ شَيْئًا تُكُلِّمَ فِي أَمْرِ الدِّينِ إِلَّا دَخَلَ فِيهِ. That there was not a single person from the Arab tribes and from the Bedouins and so on and so forth that Islam was discussed with after the treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, where the people didn't have to fight one another anymore, where the Muslims could talk to the disbelievers without there being hostility and aggression between them. There did not remain a single person in that period that was spoken to about Islam and that was called to Islam, except that they entered into Islam. It was a time when the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent rasail, he sent communications to the rulers of the earth. As our brother Malik Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he presented this weekend in the Germantown Masjid conference the explanation and the benefits that we get from the letters that the Prophet ﷺ sent during that period to call the rulers of Islam to the religion of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. He said, and so it is more effective. And so it is more effective. And so I want to read something of great benefit as regards this conflict that occurs between one set of ideas and another set of ideas, one set of values and beliefs and another set of values and beliefs, and how a Muslim can safeguard his mind. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala explains in his book, his tremendous book, Tariq al-Hijratain, rahmatullahi alayhi. He says, may Allah have mercy upon him, in explaining that al-istiqamah consists of two things. That a person correcting their heart, correcting their statements, correcting their action, it consists of two things. The first thing is safeguarding their mind, safeguarding their thoughts, safeguarding their mind. And the second is having a genuine drive and preparing for the hereafter. Having a genuine drive and preparing for the hereafter. And the second is a result of the first. When the person understands with the correct understanding about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the reason that Allah has created him, and without a doubt he's going to prepare for the hereafter. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, as for the first of these things, then it is حراسة الخواطر وحفظها. It is his safeguarding and protecting his thoughts. والحذر كل الحذر من إهمالها والاسترسال معها. And that he is at the highest level of cautiousness of neglecting his mentality and his thoughts and letting himself get carried away with his imagination. فإن أصل الفساد كله من قبلها يجيء. He said, for verily the root of every corruption comes from the direction of the thoughts. لأنها هي بذر الشيطان والنفس في أرض القلب. For verily it is the seed that is planted by the shaitan and the nafs on the soil and the earth of the heart. فإذا تمكن بذرها تآحدها الشيطان بسقيه مرة بعد أخرى حتى تصير إرادات ثم يسقيها حتى تصير عزائم ثم لا يزال بها حتى تثمر الأعمال. He said, and when the shaitan and the nafs is able to plant destructive ideologies and destructive thoughts within the mind and the heart of a person, then the shaitan will water and nourish that seed that he has planted. He'll come back over and over again until the ideas of a person and the thoughts of a person, they become intentions. And then he'll keep watering it with his filth until it becomes azaim, until it becomes until they become determinations. ثُمَّ لَا يَزَالُ بِهَا حَتَّى تُثْمِرَ الْأَعْمَالِ. And then he will not stop until those determinations turn into actions, until he went from thinking about something to doing something. And he mentioned in Al-Fawaid rahimahullah ta'ala, and then when a person does something over and over again, it becomes a habit. And once a thing is a habit, it is nearly impossible for a person to leave. And it all started with his neglecting his mentality, neglecting what he was thinking, not being afraid of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala as regards what he was thinking. He said, and there is no doubt that fighting against your thoughts is easier than fighting against your desires and your determinations. فَيَجِدُ الْعَبْدُ نَفْسَهُ عَاجِزًا أو كالعاجز عن دفعها بعد أن صارت إرادة جازمة. And the person, he will find himself incapable or nearly incapable of warding off these ideologies and these thoughts once they have become a strong determination within him. وَهُوَ الْمُفَرِّطُ إِذْ لَمْ يَدْفَعَهَا وَهِيَ خَاطِرٌ ضَعِيفٌ. And he was the one who was negligent to begin with when he did not fight against them while they were just a weak thought in his mind. كَمَنْ تَهَاوَنَ بِشَرَارَةٍ مِنْ نَارٍ وَقَعَتْ فِي حَطَبٍ يَابِسٍ. He said, like a person who saw a spark fall upon some dry grass or some dry straw. And he said, oh, it's just a spark. And this is how the thought was. It was like a spark in his mind. It was like a spark in his mind. He said, this is just like a person who saw a spark, a little piece of fire, fall upon some dry hay. He said, it's just a little spark. I'm chilling, relaxing. I'm chillaxing, right? I don't want to get up. It's not enough to really do any damage. He said this person is, and he was the one who was negligent to begin with when he didn't fight off his thoughts. Like a person took light, a spark falling upon hatab yabis, and he's some dry grass or some dry hay. فَلَمَّا تَمَكَّنَتْ مِنْهُ عَجَزَ عَنْ إِطْفَائِهَا. And once it has taken its course and started to burn up the grass and the hay and so on and so forth, he finds himself incapable of putting it out. فَإِنْ قُلْتَ, it becomes a bonfire. فَمَا تَرِيقِ إِلَى حِفْظِ الْخَوَاطِرِ. And so if a person was then to say, how does a person safeguard his thoughts? He gives us asharatu asbab. He gives us 10 things to help us protect our minds. 10 things to help us protect our minds. قُلْتُ أَسْبَابٌ عِدَّةٌ. He said, there are a number of means, and there are 10 in number. And each of them is building upon the next. In the beginning he says, أحدها العلم الجازم باطلاع الرب تبارك وتعالى ونظره إلى قلبك وعلمه بتفصيل خواترك. He said the first is that a person, they have certain knowledge that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is looking at them, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see their heart. If a person really believed that then this would compel them to be what? Ahsan. This would compel them to be better. That's what ihsan is. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. So that you worship Allah with that type of cognizance. Worship Allah as though you see Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala with that anxiousness. And if you cannot see Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, then at least you worship Allah with the understanding that Allah sees you. The understanding that Allah sees you, so that you flee from Allah to Allah. The scholars say that you flee from Allah to Allah. And a person that has certain knowledge that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is watching him. And it's not just seeing what is outside. وَنَظْرِهِ إِلَىٰ قَلْبِكَ. And that he can see what is in your heart. وَعِلْمِهِ بِتَفْصِيلِ خَوَاتِرِكَ. And that he knows the details of your thoughts. يَعْلَمُ سِرَّ وَأَخْفَى. He knows that which is secret, meaning what a person is thinking, وَأَخْفَى. And what is even more concealed than that, meaning what you will think before you think it. And what you thought was a test from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And Allah, He gave you al-irada. And Allah, He gave you al-qudra. And you do your actions according to the will that Allah created within you and the ability that Allah created within you. And as a test from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And so a person doesn't have a hujjah against Allah and say, well, why would I be allowed to think these thoughts? Or you're between one of two people. If you, have a bad thought, and you think about doing something wrong, and then you don't, then what happens? The hadith of Abi Hurairah in Sahih Muslim. And one good deed is written for you. Imagine that, right? A person will be rewarded with one good deed, right? And for everything that he left off, and he'll be rewarded with one good deed. He says so. He has this understanding that Allah is watching him. And Allah sees what is on the outside of the person. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala sees what is in the heart of the person. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows the details of your thoughts. And so when a thought comes to the mind of a person, and he thinks to himself that Allah knows what I am thinking. Allah knows what I am thinking. Right? Then this has an effect upon him. Not every thought that a person has, and is he not held accountable for also. Because we know that from the most destructive of sins. Because in general, a person is not held accountable for their sins until what? Until their sins become actionable. Until their sins become actionable. Right? But a person who has what? Su'adhan billah. Adhanina billahi dhanna saw. And those who have evil thoughts about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Alayhim da'iratul saw. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will surround them with His punishment from every direction. Su'adhan billah, having evil thoughts about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, is from the most, it is the most destructive sin. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in the book Ad-Da'u wa-Dawa, it is the most destructive sin after kufr and shirk. And it is the quickest thing to lead a person to kufr and shirk, that a person has ill thoughts about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Ibn Qayyim, he said in Al-Fawaid that there is no person who commits a sin except because of one or two reasons. He said the first reason is that the desires of a person overcome his aql. They overcome his mind. His desires overcome his mind. وهو يعلم أنه لو ترك هذا الشيء لله عوضه الله به خيرا منه. And he knows that if he had left that thing for Allah, that Allah would have replaced it with something better. He said, and the second person is a person who doesn't believe that aslan, that if he had left that thing for Allah, that he would have had that thing replaced with something better. وَلَكِنْ يَسِيءُ الظَّنْ بِاللَّهِ يُسِيءُ الظَّنَّ بِاللَّهِ. He has evil thoughts about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. He doesn't believe that if he had left it off for the sake of Allah, Allah will replace it with something better. He said all people that commit sins, their sin is for one of these two reasons. Either because of su'adhan billah, because they had ill thoughts about Allah, they thought that the only way to get what they wanted, a pleasure or enjoyment in this world, was to disobey Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And they could not have found happiness by doing it the right way. And if they had done the right thing, then Allah would not have replaced it with something better. That's the first thing a person should learn coming to the door as a new Muslim. It was the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ for new Muslims. And we know in the narration, as was mentioned before, and the Prophet ﷺ was given the khutbah Salatul Jum'ah, and a man he came, Rajulun Gharib la yadri dinah, a man who was strange, announced to the people he came, he didn't know his religion. He wanted to know his religion. A man, he wasn't a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ got down from the member. They brought him a chair with iron legs. He sat upon the chair. He called that man to Islam. Another narration. And he tells us what this man was told by the Prophet ﷺ. It's authentic narration that says that the Prophet ﷺ told him that whoever leaves off something for Allah, Allah will give him what is better than it. أَبْدَلَهُ اللَّهُ بِهِ مَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ. That Allah will exchange that thing for something better. The man wasn't even a Muslim. The man wasn't even a Muslim. I remember an irreligious Muslim who ran a liquor store in my neighborhood in a city that had barely any Muslims. It was one of the first things that I heard that interested me in Islam. He says, I don't know much about this religion. I see that you're interested in it. You keep asking me questions about it. All I know is that the more I practice this religion, that whenever I do what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm happy and my life is good. And whenever I go away from it, my life is miserable. And even the most irreligious Muslim knows that. Or they should. That if you leave off something for Allah Ta'ala, and if you do things the right way, Allah Ta'ala will give you what is better than it. And so a person, and they think a thought, Ibn Qayyim Rahimullah Ta'ala, he said, the first thing is that they have certain knowledge. That Allah Ta'ala sees what they are thinking. That Allah Ta'ala sees them, and He is looking at their heart, and He knows the details of their thoughts. الثاني حياؤك منه. The second is what is produced as a result of this knowledge. Because knowledge that doesn't have action behind it, and the greatest action is the action of the heart. Is knowledge that is dar, and his harmful knowledge is a hujjah alayka la lak, is the evidence against you and not for you. Ibn Qayyim Rahimullah Ta'ala, he says the second thing, and this is the fruit. And all these things, they come after a person having knowledge that Allah Ta'ala is looking at your heart, that Allah knows. As was stated by Al-Imam Muhammad Al-Amin Al-Shinqiti Rahimullah Ta'ala throughout his writings, he said that you will barely find a page in the book of Allah except that Allah reminds us on that page that He knows all, sees all, hears all, is watching all, observing all, witnessing all. Ta'ala, he says the greatest admonition that came from the heavens to the earth. The greatest admonition that came from the heavens to the earth, and you will barely find a page in the book of Allah except that this admonition is upon that page. He said the second thing is haya'uka min. Your shyness of Allah. Your shyness of Allah. This is the sign that you have benefited from that knowledge. And if you find that you are about to commit a sin, or that you have the determination or the feeling to do a sin, the shaitan has come to you. Shaitanu ma'al wahid wa huwa min al-ithnaini ab'ad. He comes to you when you're all by yourself. The shaitan is closest to the single person, and he is farther away from two people, as the hadith says, من أراد منكم بحبحة الجنة فليلزم الجماعة فإن الشيطان مع الواحد وهو من الاثنين أبعد. Whoever wants the best part of the paradise, let him stick to the community. Let him be with the believers, for the shaitan is with the person who is all by himself and is farther away from two. The person is attacked the most by the shaitan when he is all by himself. If that's not enough, he's all by himself, the shaitan is unleashing arsenal against him of waswasa. Nothing is helping him. Nothing is helping him. And he knows that Allah is watching him. But that is not enough. And that is not enough. And he knows that he needs to increase in his coming close to Allah Ta'ala and learning about Allah Ta'ala. He said the second thing, haya'uka min, is was produced by that of shyness of Allah Ta'ala. The hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَنِ الْإِسْتِحْيَاءُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَقَّ الْحَيَاءُ, shyness of Allah with the true shyness, and تَحْفَظَ الرَّأْسَ وَمَا وَعَى, that you protect your head and what it contains, your eyes, your ears, your tongue, everything that is contained in your head, and تَحْفَظَ الرَّأْسَ وَمَا وَعَى. Some of the ulama, they said وَمَا وَعَى means the faculties that are contained in the head, of the eyes, the ears, and the tongue, so on and so forth. Right, that which are the gateways of sin and disobedience, and so on and so forth. And this is the strongest of the two meanings. And the second, wama wa'a, from al-wa'i, a person's understanding, that you protect your head and your thoughts and your understanding. And this, without a doubt, is meant by it. And this is from the meaning of it. A person, they protect their head and their thoughts. Shyness of Allah, with the true shyness, they said, The Prophet ﷺ said, be shy of Allah. They said, we are shy of Allah. He said, rather shyness of Allah, the true shyness that you protect your head and what it contains, what you understand with it, what it contains and what it retains. وَتَحْفَظَ الْبَطْنَ وَمَا حَوَى, and that you safeguard your stomach and what you put into it, your insides and what you put into them. وَأَن تَذْكُرَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْبِلَى, and that you remember death and al-bila, meaning the marad that leads to death, sickness that leads to death. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ تَرَكَ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, whoever wants to hear after we leave off the beauty of the life of this world. وَمَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ اسْتَحْيَا مِنَ اللَّهِ حَقَّ الْحَيَاءِ, whoever does that is shy of Allah with the true shyness. So without a doubt, it is a mentality that contributes to a person being shy of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. إِنَّ لِكُلِّ دِينٍ خُلُقْ وَخُلُقُ الْإِسْلَامِ الْحَيَاءِ. Indeed, every religious group or every religion that has a character that is particular to it. And the khuluq of Islam is shyness. And the khuluq of Islam is shyness. This is produced on account of a person knowing Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is watching. الثالث إجلالك له أن يرى مثل تلك الخواتر في بيته الذي خلقه لمعرفته ومحبته. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said the third thing is your ijlal, meaning your ta'zeem of Allah, your veneration of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, your recognition of the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For real this time, right? He says your veneration and recognition of the greatness and majesty of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, lest that Allah should see these types of thoughts inside of His Bayt, yani His house that He created within, and His temple of worship, and His place of worship is, and He Bayt that He created within your heart, so that you can know Him and love Him, so that you can know Him and love Him tabarak wa ta'ala. He says your veneration of Allah, that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, you have more respect for Allah than that Allah should see these thoughts inside of the heart that Allah created within you, so that you can know Him and love Him tabarak wa ta'ala. And the purpose of this heart was these two things, and all the functions of the heart, they go back to these two things, and in ma'rifah wal mahabba, and what a person knows and what they love. And the greatest thing that a person knows is who is Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. The greatest thing that a person must love is Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, and what is loved by Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And so when a person knows that Allah created his heart to know Him and love Him, then he has more respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to let Allah see these thoughts in his heart. الرابع خوفك منه أن تسقط من عينه بتلك الخواتر, is your fear of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, that you would fall in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fourth thing is your fear that you will fall in the eyes of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala for having these thoughts in your heart. is that you are afraid of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, that you are afraid that you will fall in the eyes of Allah, that you will lose status with Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala because of having these thoughts. Al-Khamis, the sixth, fifth. I have a slight illness today. Barakallahu feekum. Samahuni. And Al-Khamis, the fifth. إنذارك له أن يساكن قلبك غير محبته. He said the fifth thing is that you have ithar for Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. What is ithar? The fourth thing was that you are afraid of falling in status in the sight of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala for having these thoughts. You're afraid of falling in status in the sight of Allah for having these thoughts. What is ithar? Ithar. Al-ithar, selflessness. Right? Al-ithar is precedence or selflessness. And he is that a person that instead of thinking about what they want, what their nafs wants, they think about what Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala wants. They are selfless as regards Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and they would dislike that anything that is contrary to the love of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala settles within their heart. And they dislike that anything that is contrary to the love of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala settles in their heart. Meaning they hate that anything that Allah loves should be loved by their heart. And they are selfless. As regards their desires, they want what Allah wants for them above what they want for themselves, of things that may be harmful for them. And they would hate that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, or that the love of anything that is contrary to the love of Allah should settle within their heart. So these are the first five things. And a person knowing that Allah is looking at their heart, that He knows everything. Second, the shyness of Allah. Third, their veneration of Allah. Fourth, their fear of falling in status with Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And that they will become from those people that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, and they have turned away from Allah, so Allah leaves them to themselves and these sorts of things. This is the fourth thing. The fifth thing, and he is their selflessness as regards, meaning their desire, their preference for Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, for the love of Allah, and to be that which settles in their heart, and their dislike that the love of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, that the love of anything that is contrary to the love of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala settles within their heart. Asadis, the sixth thing, خشيتك أن تتولى تلك الخواتر ويستعر شرارها فتأكل ما في القلب من الإيمان ومحبة الله وتضحب به جملة وأنت لا تشعر. He said the sixth thing is that you are afraid that these thoughts will reproduce each other. That one thought will lead to another thought, will lead to another thought until you get carried away with your imagination. وَيَسْتَعِرُّ شِرَارُهَا, and these sparks will become a blazing fire. فَتَأْكُلَ مَا فِي الْقَلْبِ, and that they will devour what is in the heart of your belief and love of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And that they will devour, you are afraid that these thoughts will reproduce each other, and that they will become an enormous fire and devour, just consume what is in your heart of faith and love of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. وَتُضْحِبُ بِهِ جُمْلَةً, and remove your iman and your love of Allah altogether. Something that we see, sadly, from some people who are weak in their faith. And we should all believe that we are weak in our faith. And some people that they feel as though Islam comes in between them and their desires, that Islam needs to be pushed out of the way. When Islam comes in between them and their desires, Islam needs to be pushed out of the way. And this is something that is from the thagarat of the shaitan, the openings that the shaitan destroys mankind with. As Ibn Qayyim mentioned, three things. And the three things that, in one of his books, that are the entry points of the shaitan to attack the person: his desires, his anger, and his needs not being met. And he was for the person, and inna li nafsika alayka haqq, indeed your nafs has a haqq upon you, right? a person and he shouldn't fight against what is halal for their nafs, so on and so forth, to the point that they start to hate their ibadah, right? And a person, they overdo it, they put too much upon themselves, and then they start to hate what they're doing, and these sorts of affairs. And so, how much more so for the youth when we extend the age of their puberty to 18, 21, 25 years old, right? And we don't look at the need that they have to get married, the desires that they have, preparing them, and being willing to financially support our youth to get married young when they have those sorts of desires, these sorts of things. And when a person has desires, needs, rights that they have upon them, as was said about Umar, that it is from the rights that the youth has upon his father, that he has not fulfilled the rights of his child until he fulfills, is that he marries them off, is that he marries his sons and his daughters off. It's a right that your children have upon you, O Muslim father. And when the children, they have those sorts of desires, and they have access to everything and everyone, and they have a community of people to talk to, and so on and so forth, and you've given them cell phones and computers and this, that, and the third, and put them in a school, even some Islamic schools with free mixing, or with some tahawun in the issue of free mixing, or they take light of the issue of free mixing, or they have friends that compel them in the other direction, and they see that their friends have boyfriends and girlfriends and this and that, and they start to have these desires, and they start to have these wants, and they start to have these lusts. And we ignore these things, and we just say fast, and we just say forget about it. We just say you're not ready. We just say you don't have a job, you don't have a career, you need to get at least your bachelor's degree first, or your master's degree first, or this degree or that degree, or whatever. This is one of the greatest problems facing the Muslim youth today. And it is from the greatest doorways that the kuffar, that the shayateen of the mankind have used to assault the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To go to the youth and they say, look, they don't even care about you. There's no jobs for you. You can't get married. You can't do this. You can't do that. You have rights. Take to the streets. Heck, no, we won't go. We're going to burn this such and such down. Have a peaceful protest. Flip over cars. Throw Molotov cocktails. So on and so forth. Right? And you see that? The shayateen of the jinn kind and the shayateen of mankind, because of what? Because people's needs haven't been fulfilled. Because people's needs haven't been fulfilled, that they are able to get caught up with their desires. They are able to be destroyed by the shaitan. So this is something that is a real affair. He said the person should fear that these thoughts he will get carried away with these thoughts, and that they will become a blazing fire, and that they will devour what is in his heart of iman and his love of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And Shaykh Hassan, he said this to me some years ago. He said that this is one of the greatest things that is threatening the Muslim youth, is that they feel as though Islam is in between them and their love, and they fall in love, so on and so forth. He said even in Egypt, even in Egypt you find a lot of the youth, they go away from a tadayyun, from being religious and so on and so forth, because there is no solution for them as regards these passions that they have and so on and so forth. So it's a real issue. He said, and so it devours, they are afraid that these thoughts will devour what exists in their heart of iman and the love of Allah, and do away with them entirely. وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ, while you don't even realize. السابع, the seventh thing, أن تعلم أن تلك الخواطر بمنزلة الحب الذي يلقى للطائر ليصاد به. He said, the seventh thing is that the person knows, once he realizes these first six things, is that he knows that these thoughts, they are like a seed. They are like a seed that is placed inside of a net to catch a bird. They are what? They are a trap. They are a snare of the shaitan. And there is a snare of the shaitan, and each one of these thoughts are like a seed. It's like a morsel of food that is put inside of a net or a trap to snare its prey. So each thought, each destructive thought that a person has, that he doesn't fight against his nafs concerning and fight against the shaitan concerning, it is like a seed that is placed inside of a net, within a net. فَعْلَمْ أَنَّ كُلَّ خَاطِرٍ مِنْهَا فَهُوَ حَبَّةٌ فِي فَخٍ مَنْصُوبٍ يُصَيْدِكَ. He said, and you must know that every thought from amongst these thoughts, each and every one of them, is like an individual seed within an individual net that is designed to ensnare you. وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ. Well, you don't even realize. You don't even realize that Shaitan has been doing this for a really long time, and he has become professional at doing it. He has been destroying mankind generation after generation after generation after generation. And the shayateen of the jinn kind and the mankind work together to come up with psychology and social psychology and so on and so forth in these times. And he said they can dazzle you with the movie industry and the music industry and the entertainment industry and all these different things to have you bewitched. To have you bewitched. And has reached a pinnacle in these times that mankind has never seen before. And the tools of self-destruction today are more than people have ever seen in the history of mankind. وَأَنْتَ لَا تَشْعُرُ. Ibn al-Qayyim says, and you don't even realize. الثامن, the eighth, أن تعلم أن تلك الخواتر الرديئة لا تجتمع هي وخواتر الإيمان والدواعي المحبة والإنابة أصلا. He said, the eighth thing is that you know that these destructive thoughts cannot be found together along with the thoughts that are the product of faith and one's love of Allah and al-inaba and turning to Allah Ta'ala. And they cannot be found together in the same heart. And they cannot be found together in the same time in the same place. Why? They are mutanaqidan. And they are polar opposites to each other. They are counteractive to one another. He said it is not possible that a person can have these thoughts and those thoughts at the same time. They can both exist in his heart at the same time. But he can't be having any good thoughts and bad thoughts at the same time. And what his mind is consumed with. And he very possibly, of course, and he can be having a battle in his mind. He can be going back and forth and back and forth. Listen to what he says. He said that these destructive thoughts cannot be found together at the same time with the thoughts that are the product of a person's belief and a product of his love of Allah and his constant turning to Allah Ta'ala. بل هي ضدها من كل وجه. But rather they are their opposites in every way. وما اجتمعا في قلب إلا غلب أحدهما صاحبه. And these two types of thoughts, productive thoughts and destructive thoughts, they are not found together in a single heart, except that one of them will eventually conquer the heart of the person. Except that one group of thoughts, one mentality is going to eventually conquer the person. وَأَخْرَجَهُ. And is going to eventually, and it may eventually remove the other thoughts. وَاسْتَوْطَنَ مَكَانَهُ. And take the place, take residence where those other thoughts used to be. So a person used to begin their day and end their day thinking about what they need to do in the day to prepare for Allah Ta'ala in the hereafter and getting closer to the paradise and farther from the fire. And they end their day saying, what have I done today that is going to destroy me, that I need to make istighfar for? And the person spending their day trying to get close to Allah Ta'ala and trying to fulfill the rights of the creation of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, thinking of the most beneficial things that he can do, the person, he will find that his mentality has a paradigm shift. His mentality that it flips, ra'sun ala aqib, head over heels. And he becomes a different person. You see the person one day, alhamdulillah, his lihya, kada, and his thiyab, kada, mashallah. What you saw on the outside, إِنَّمَا نَحْكُمُ بِالظَّوَاهِرِ. As was said about Umar radiallahu anhu, we can only judge people based on what is apparent. We can only judge people based upon what is apparent. What was on the outside was beautiful, was jameel. As was said by some of the Salaf, they said, وَكَمْ مُبَيِّضْ لِثِيَابِهِ وَهُوَ لِقَلْبِهِ مُدَنِّسٌ. How many people are brightening or widening their thobe while they are dirtying their hearts? Thobe was crispy, pressed, creases, right? They call the oyster white, shiny. Like, whoo, if you're standing in the sun, you might have to look away. وَهُوَ لِقَلْبِهِ مُدَنِّسٌ. He was dirtying his heart. You didn't see the war that was going on inside. You don't know what he was doing to himself. The next time you see him, He looks like he's a walking advertisement for Sean Combs and Russell Simmons and Jay-Z. His lihya, and he has hair. You say, you know, you got more hair than your wife, brother. Aish hasal. You grow it out. That ain't fair. Give the horsey back his hair. It's like, hair extensions, what you got going on in your head, brother? What is this? Aish hasal. What happened? There was something, some skeletons in his closet, some evils that he had within his heart. He didn't fight. He didn't fight. And eventually one, خَلَبَ الْآخَرِ وَأَخْرَجَهُ وَاسْتَوْطَنَ مَكَانَهُ. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, one ideology, one mentality overcame the other, removed the other, and moved it in its place. Kicked down the door, threw him out in the street, said, I live here now. This is my house. هكذا. What number was that? 8. He said, فَمَا ظَنُّوا بِقَلْبٍ غَلَبَتْ خَوَاتِرُ النَّفْسِ وَالشَّيْطَانِ فِيهِ خَوَاتِرَ الْإِيمَانِ وَالْمَحَبَّةِ وَالْمَعْرِفَةِ فَأَخْرَجَتْهَا. He said, what could you imagine to be the case of a heart where the thoughts and suggestions of the nafs and the shaitan have overcome the thoughts that are connected to iman and one's love of Allah and what they know about Allah and His religion, فَأَخْرَجَتْهَا. And so they have removed those other thoughts. They have removed the khair that was within him. وَاسْتَوْطَنَتْ مَكَانَهَا. And what can you imagine to be the destruction that would befall this heart? لَكِنْ لَوْ كَانَ لِلْقَلْبِ حَيَاةٌ لَشَعَرَ بِأَلَمِ ذَلِكَ وَأَحَسَّ بِمَصَابِهِ. He said, but so long as the heart is still alive, he will feel the pain from that. And he will feel that he has been afflicted. And that's a sign that a person's heart is dead. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that the person, when they don't have the shu'ur, when the heart لا يتألم بورود القبيح عليه, and when the heart doesn't feel pain, when it is presented with filthy affairs, disgusting affairs, the heart doesn't feel any more ta'allum. The heart doesn't feel any more aversion or dislike or pain from what is disgusting being presented to it, has become that desensitized to what is hated to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, then that is the evidence that the heart of a person has died. He said, وَمَا لِجُرْحٍ بِمَيِّتٍ إِلَامٍ. As a poet, he said, like a wound doesn't hurt a person who is dead already. If you stab a person who is dead already, it's not going to hurt him. A person is dead, you can't harm a person who's dead. A person who's dead already, they don't feel pain. هكذا. Yani their body doesn't feel pain anymore. There's a statement of a poet. He said, وَمَا لِجُرْحٍ بِمَيِّتٍ إِلَامٍ. And that the wound doesn't cause pain to a person who is dead already. And likewise, that which would normally hurt the heart of a person, if he doesn't feel any pain from it, is a sign that his heart has died. وَهُوَ لَا يَشْعُرُ. And he doesn't even realize. The ninth thing he said, in يُعْلَمْ أن تلك الخواتر بحر من بحور الخيال لا ساحل له. He said the ninth thing is that he knows. And how much applicable is this to the time of any global technology, global information, the World Wide Web, and the boundaries being removed from mankind, these sorts of things. He said the ninth thing is that he knows that these thoughts, that they are an ocean from the oceans of one's imagination that have no shores. Oceans without shores. And he meaning that if a person gets caught up, in this ocean of darkness, he said, فَإِذَا دَخَلَ الْقَلْبُ فِي غَمَارَاتِهِ غَرِقَ فِيهِ. He said once the heart enters into the abysses in the darkness of that ocean of his imaginations, it will drown. وَاتَّاحَ فِي ظُلُمَاتِهِ. And he will be lost and confused in the darkness and compounded darkness. فَيَطْلُبُ الْخَلَاصَ مِنْهِ فَلَا يَجِدُ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And he will look for an escape route from it and will not find a way. Allahu Akbar. That was the hal of the majority of us in our communities before Allah guided us to Islam. We know where that would take us. You know, when a person doesn't have hidayah, when he doesn't have knowledge, when he doesn't have understanding, he doesn't have understanding and a correct methodology and so on and so forth, that his mind will take him and his shaitan will take him, and To the point that a poet once said, وَكُنْتُ امْرِئًا مِنْ جُنْدِ إِبْلِيسِ فَارْتَقَ بِيَ الْحَالُ حَتَّى صَارَ إِبْلِيسُ مِنْ جُنْدِ. That I used to be a man from the army of Iblis, and my situation escalated. My situation escalated until Iblis became a part of my army. And a person starts to do things that embarrass Shaitan. Shaitan is like, whoo, what you doing to yourself? Shaitan couldn't have hatched that plot against you. Ibn Qayyim mentions this throughout his writings. And either the person may hatch a plot against himself that is more destructive than anything coming from his nafs, that is more destructive than anything that the Shaitan could have done to him. He said, and so when he gets caught up with his imaginations, he starts drowning and drifting off. And he may seek al-khalas minhu. What happens? كلا بل ران على قلوبهم. Right? And he sooner or later, and the sins will compile and compound upon his heart until his heart is sealed. Until his heart is sealed. And he'll seek al-khalas. And he'll seek salvation, he'll seek a way out. فَلَا يَجِدُ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And will not find a way. فَقَلْبٌ تَمْلِكُهُ الْخَوَاتِرُ بَعِيدٌ مِنَ الْفَلَاحِ مُعَذَّبٌ مَشْغُولٌ بِمَا لَا يُفِيدُ. He said the heart that is controlled by its imaginations and its thoughts, and it is far away from success, and it is a heart that is tormented, and it is busy with that which will not benefit it. That's why people spend so much time entertaining themselves, because as soon as they leave off overstimulating themselves through their sensory perceptions, through their audio-visual receptors, through their eyes and their ears, as soon as they turn it off, they're miserable. It's like a sugar pill. It's a placebo. And they just want to busy their heart, busy their mind, busy their desires with something to remove from them the adhab, the pain, the stress inside of their heart. And so they spend so much time entertaining themselves and inebriating themselves, and that means drinking, getting high, so on and so forth, right? And destroying their minds and so on and so forth. Why? Just to numb the pain. It's artificial happiness. Artificial happiness. He said you find this person that they're tormented and they're busy with what will not benefit them. What are we going to say to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala as regards our ihmal, our negligence of our children, our negligence of our salah, our negligence of so many affairs? A person may act like they don't have the ability to stop and pray, but they have 3.5 hours to be on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They have hour after hour after hour to spend with their eyes glued to the boob tube, with their eyes watching movies with their eyes, and reading magazines with their eyes, watching shows, and grown men watching soap operas and these sorts of things. Ya ha'ula. Arba' bi nafsik ya akhi. And get yourself under control. He said these thoughts, he said it is known that these thoughts, that they are, his imagination, that it is an ocean without shores. And that if he lets his heart go off into his thoughts, then he will drown and he will be lost in the darkness. And he will look for a way out and may not find a way out. He said, and so this heart that is tormented and it is busy with what will not benefit him. Al-ashir, the last thing, أن تلك الخواتر هي وادي الحمقى وآماني الجاهلين فلا تثمر لصاحبها إلا الندامة والخزي وإذا غلبت على القلب أورثته الوساوس وعزلته عن سلطانه وأفسدت عليه رعيته وألقته في الأسر الطويل. He said, is that these thoughts, is that he understands that these thoughts, that they are the valleys that are inhabited by stupid people. And they are nothing but amani al-jahilin. They are nothing but the false hopes of the ignorant. That these thoughts that he has, they are nothing but false hopes. They have no haqiqah to them. They have no reality to them. And not based in reality. The person is in a world of make-believe. He's in a fantasy land. He said they are wadi al-hamqah. He said they are the valley of the idiots. Wa amani al-jahilin. and the false hopes of the jahilin, the wishful thinking of the jahilin, of the ignorant. فَلَا تُثْمِرُ لِصَاحِبِهَا إِلَّا النَّدَامَةَ وَالْخِزِي. And the only thing that they will produce for the person who has them is regret and humiliation. وَإِذَا غَلَبَتْ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ أَوْرَثَتْهُ الْوَسَاوِسُ. And once they have defeated the heart and conquered the heart, then they will cause the whisperings of the nafs and the shaitan to become inherent within them. And they will cause, as a result, the whisperings of the shaitan and the nafs, and he too gain control of the heart. وَعَزَالَتُ عَنْ سُلْطَانِهِ. And they and his thoughts will remove his authority from his heart. He'll be what? He'll be brainwashed. He's a clean slate, right? Ya akhi. Earth to Ahmed. Where you at? It's the first thing you say to a person, and he does something crazy, is what were you thinking? Or were you thinking? And they said to the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam informed that there would come a time when the Muslims were slaughtering one another, shedding the blood of one another, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was asked by his companions, وَأَيْنَ عُقُولَ النَّاسِ يَوْمَئِذٍ. Where will the minds of people be on at that time? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, قَدْ ذَهَبَتْ عُقُولُهُم. They will have lost their minds. They will have lost their minds. And so when a person has this type of destructive behavior, he said that it will remove, or this type of destructive mentality, he said that it will remove a person's authority and control over his own heart. His nafs will get control over his heart, and shaitan will get control over his heart. وَأَفْسَدَتْ عَلَيْهِ رَعِيَّتَهُ. And it will turn his subjects against him, meaning his body. His subjects are his tongue, his hands, his limbs, so on and so forth. And it will turn his subjects against him. He will be working for his own destruction. He will be working for his own destruction. وَأَلْقَتْهُ فِي الْأَسَرِ الطَّوِيلِ. And it will cast him within a long-lasting imprisonment, a long-lasting prison sentence. And the person, because he didn't have this proper understanding, he didn't fill his heart with beneficial knowledge, and affecting his heart with contemplating upon the information, and he spent his life upon this type of ignorance and destructive mentality. And he is, as the poet, he said, and he وَأَرْوَاحُهُمْ, and he وَالْجَهْلُ, and that ignorance is death لِصَاحِبِهِ قَبْلَ أَمْوَاتِهِمْ. And that ignorance is death for those that are ignorant before they die. وَأَرْوَاحُهُمْ قَبْلَ الْقُبُورِ وَأَجْسَامُهُمْ قَبْلَ الْقُبُورِ قُبُورِ. And their bodies are graves before their bodies are placed into their graves, meaning that their hearts are dead and buried inside of their bodies. Their hearts are dead and buried inside their bodies. وَأَرْوَاحُهُمْ فِي وَحْشَةٍ مِّن جُسُومِهِمْ وَلَيْسَ لَهُمْ حَتَّى النُّشُورِ نُشُورٌ. And their souls want to escape their bodies. They have despaired of their bodies, their souls, and he knows that their bodies are trying to destroy them, and they will not be brought back to life until the day that the creation are brought back to life for the standing in front of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect I and you and our families and those that we love, and from the effects of this ghazwun fikri, and this ideological war and this destructive mentality that has afflicted many of the Muslims. Sa'ilin Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tawfiq wa sadad. We say this asking Allah tabarak wa ta'ala tawfiq wa sadad wal hidayah ila sabil rashad. Jazakumullahu khairan. Inshallah, the brother, our dear brother and elder Musa Richardson will be beginning his